Right? You familiar with that? My feeling, by the way, and I could ask you this, is there's nothing going on at this campus about that. Is that right? We don't have any students that are all upset or no threats or anything. I know some of you feel like there's nothing going on this campus about anything, actually. Is that right?
I don't really know.
I didn't want to mention names, you know, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. How did the Halloween thing last night? They usually have a big Halloween thing for, you know, that students put on for kids.
I think that was last week.
It was last week?
Yeah, last Saturday.
Instead of Halloween night?
Yeah.
Interesting. No wonder I didn't have any people coming by my house. They were all worn out from all of the previous. Well, and I think there's a reason for that, and I can reply to Steve and point out, well, I mean, as far as physically on this campus, I don't see anything whatsoever. I think these are issues that affect campuses that have 40,000 students and have groups of people that are associated with particular sides and are voicing their concern, rightfully so, at various places and so on. But I mean, we have, what, 10,000 students right now, approximately? Used to be around 14,000, but it dropped because of COVID and so on. It is growing back up now that we're getting through COVID a little bit, but it still seems a very sparsely populated campus to me compared to what it used to be. It used to be very, very, you know, lots of stuff going on all over the place. Way too much stuff for you to even think about going to more than one or two things at a time. But that's my answer to him. But I'd have to be at one of the other campuses to see how things are going there. But let's get to the heart of the issue here, which I kind of put up. See if I can put it up the same way I did. Ooh, I got a darker marker this time. And then I wanted to put analytic and synthetic. And the concern is, can there be a synthetic a priori? And I talked about, you know, oh, I see a horse, now I know that that's a horse. So I have a specific experience that then becomes an analytic opportunity for me. So I can fill it in here. And that leads me to any future occasion to know ahead of time, yes, I know that that's a horse, so I can already see that's a horse. So I can fill in, experience gives me a synthetic a posteriori, and that leads me to knowing what horses are. I know the definition of them, and that leads me to be able to recognize them ahead of another experience. But the question is, what on earth are they concerned about here that Kant realizes Hume is explaining as a problem? And that is, there has to be things that explain how we have experiences even before we have that experience.
Isn't that just like a reversion back to Plato?
Well, yes. This is a critique of all previous philosophical explorations that try to explain why things are the way they are without actual laboratory experiments that show you.
So
know,
they just
I can't go.
So just return back to Plato. It all returns to Plato.
Well, that's why I said if you were raised with the belief that philosophy is a total waste of your time, that's David Hume and, you know, the Scottish Enlightenment that said, you know, up until now, all the attempts to explain all this stuff is a total waste. because none of it gives us knowledge. It's all just a hypothesis that actually can't be tested in a laboratory. How can I go into a lab and say, well, let's see, are my ideas first, and then and then there's stuff? Or is there stuff first, and then there's ideas? How do you get an opportunity to test that kind of thing in a laboratory to find out if that's a useful hypothesis or just nonsense? And David Hume feels it's absolute nonsense. And so, yes, Plato, all of it is basically, why even study all this old stuff when you get no knowledge out of it? Just do modern science. You're still just getting a hypothesis, but it's an actionable, practical affair, right? You're going to be able to know whether or not you can set your toaster at this spot and the toast will be done the way you like it. Or no, it's too far done. Let's turn it back a little bit, right? That's a practical, everyday experiment you could do. Won't help you fill this block in. And so Kant, in reading this book, realizes this means that all of philosophy, which is an awful lot of what he was teaching and studying all his life, was a total waste of time. How can we answer Hume? How can we do this? And that's where Kant makes that significant development for us. And there's a couple ways of figuring out exactly what's going on in his approach to it. Remember, actually, what I want to do is go to this site, notice. So if we look up category, remember Aristotle gave us the idea that what we know are categories. So it's categorical thinking. You have sets of things, categories of things, and what we're knowing is the relationships between these categories. And once you know all the describable relationships, then you know everything. You know, that was the whole approach to encyclopedic knowledge and everything. But Aristotle started off by saying that there were certain categories that things had. And for example, you have, am I on the right page here? So Aristotelian realism, here we go. Aristotelian realism. Everything has to have substance. Remember, that was his main critique of Plato, who thought everything really was ideal and that affected matter, right? So instead of having substance for Plato, no, substance was not a category of everything. Aristotle says it is. That's the first thing. Everything has to have substance. Another thing, everything has to have number. You have to have a quantity of everything. You have to have a quality. And remember that, you know, it was especially positive or negative quality. So all horses are animals. No dogs or cats, right? That's a positive or negative quality. Everything has to have relations to other things. Everything has to be in a place. Unless it's an abstract idea. Ooh, let's not go there yet. Dates. You know, everything has to have a posture, or the way you would describe it, you know, sitting, lying, chest set, sitting on the table. A state, you know, whether or not you're dressed or nude or tired or, you know, things of that sort. It has to be in action of some sort, sitting there. It's actually the kind of action that a desk is just sitting there in the room. And I'm not sure how passion is being understood in that particular case. But so we have 10. There should be 10 there.
I guess passion would be more like sensation, bodily sensation.
Being cut, being burned. But in any case, for Aristotle, those categories are the categories that all things must have. So when you're studying them and you're coming up with your encyclopedic explanation of all knowledge, you're basically describing these categories for each of the sets of things in your categories that are then related to other categories. That's what knowledge is all about, right? And thanks to Hume, we now realize, and we still basically accept this, that we cannot know those categories with regard to the thing in itself, which, remember, we've got that expression since John Locke. It gives us the British empiricist problem, right? How can we know the thing in itself when all we can actually know is our own experience, right? Well, Kant's answer is to give us what he calls his transcendental method, or also transcendental idealism. And that's going to tell us what things must be the case for the way we perceive things. So these don't apply to the thing in itself. We've accepted that from David Hume and the British empiricist problem. What I can know, however, is that in order for me to experience phenomena, I have to have certain things happening for there to be experience. Apart from this, for example, we have to have a self who's having the experience. It's pretty darn hard for any experience to occur without a person who's perceiving the experience, right? So you need a self who's perceiving the experience. And there has to be things in themselves. It's not like you're just interacting with nothing. There's something out there that is the thing in itself. And we also seem to have everything experienced in time. Think about anything you like, you feel time is elapsing. Whether you're just imagining something, thinking about abstract ideas, or imagining a football game, the quarters, and the way football time works, it's an hour-long game, my wife says, but it takes 3 hours, because why? There's all these other things that happen in it. Time out. Well, that's not part of the hour, right? Etc., right? So you think everything has to experience time. Even abstract ideas, thinking about things, takes time. We might have difficulties figuring out which time we're using, right? Because it does seem like some experiences, time seems speeded up. Time funds when you're having flies, says the frog. But you get the idea that time is just dragging. Philosophy class, slowest time of the day.
For me, it's the quickest.
Thank you. It's a compliment, of course, because you enjoy. When you're enjoying something, it seems like time goes very quickly, right? Time, when we're having fun, time is fast, right? When it's kneeling on your knees, for the sermon, or you don't kneel on your knees for the sermon, but for the ching 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 ching, which, by the way, those 3 bells that the Mass uses, they used to use those same bells for the temples that celebrated Apollo. So those go way back, right? We use those, even from the invention of metal, I guess.
What are they called?
Those 3 little chimes that when I was at Mass, the older boy always would ring, when the priest would hold up the host, at corpus meum, etc., which the Latin corpus meum the Protestants made fun of that and called it, instead of hoc est corpus meum, right? They ended up calling it hocus pocus, right? And we still make fun of hocus pocus, you know, it's magic, you know, etc. So time, you know, but of course today it's even worse because we get into relativity and, you know, Einstein's experiment, you know, about time, and it's almost infuriating to me that the equation has to work out that the faster something goes, the slower time goes for it. And that just seems nonsense to me. I think it's just the opposite. Time stays the same and things speed up or slow down. You know, but you know, when you're thinking, well, as fast as anything can go is the speed of light, and as things are approaching the speed of light, time has to slow down, because otherwise the equation isn't an equation, right? That's what the equations do. So theoretically, if you traveled at the speed of light to a planet and then came back, you would be much younger than everybody that you left, right? You know, all that kind of thing. And even in a smaller way, you know, you think you're actually going to live longer, but that doesn't make sense if you're living in Alaska, because the planet is
spinning faster further away from the equator.
yes, that's you know, same thing with flying. They've actually done experiments with flying, and in fact, atomic clocks do register a slight difference between the ones